Welcome back to Civilian Tactical Science Channel Edition, and though I might look more like a computer scientist than a real scientist, today's experiment may be the most important self-defense piece of science you're going to see on YouTube all week. Because if you want to trust your life to an affordable rifle, you need to make sure that it works, and that's what we're going to find out today. Now to do this, we're going to run 5 different tests to see if 1,000 rounds of 5.56 can kill a poverty tier AR-15. And whether or not we get results that are positive or negative, I promise you'll be able to walk away with intel allowing you to make sure your AR-15 is as reliable as possible. Of course, for our first test, we need to make sure that this thing even fires. Yeah, it fires just fine. So you know that $350 can get you a firing rifle, but can it get you a rifle that's actually gonna last? Well, let me show you how we're gonna find out. For our 5 tiers of the test, we're gonna shoot 200 rounds of 5.56 through this rifle for each. Then we're gonna do a quick inspection and details if anything actually broke, and we're gonna dive into one key aspect about budget rifles that I think would be important for everybody to know, and then we're gonna keep on shooting the next 200 rounds. Now, before we get too far into our 200 round burn down for our first test, where did this rifle come from and how did I get it? This is the Radical Firearms RF15. You're gonna find this thing on some insane sales in many different places, but specifically this was a sale I found from Battle Hawk Armory, and I thought, how good or bad could a $350 rifle be? So I asked Battle Hawk, hey, could you send me this cheap rifle and 1,000 rounds of ammunition? Now here's why it doesn't matter that this rifle was sent to me for free, and it won't bias my opinion one way or the other. Battle Hawk Armory doesn't care if this rifle absolutely dies because they have a plethora of awesome options for AR-15s. So for them, there's no sweat off their back if this test shows that these cheap rifles are no good. All it's gonna mean for Battle Hawk Armory is you would go and buy a more expensive rifle from them. Back to our first 200 rounds. Our handguard's getting a little bit wiggly, and I did mean to tighten this down before we started, so let's see if this stays just the same or if it gets any worse. Not affecting the function whatsoever. I'm thinking I'm even gonna throw a hand stop on here. Look at this thing cooking. That is a lot of smoke. All right, that's officially our first 200 rounds, so let's go over the state of the gun, all the malfunctions and lessons we learned. So for the state of the gun, it's very hot, but that's of course gonna be any AR-15 you shoot 200 rounds through in under 5 minutes. And as for malfunctions, our grand total was 0, which is actually quite pleasantly surprising for a budget $350 AR-15. That being said, for lessons learned, it's not all sunshine and rainbows with these budget AR-15s. This guy didn't happen to have any problems, but let me tell you the most common area of failure with cheap AR-15s that I've seen, and that's going to be this guy, the bolt carrier group. Usually it's going to be the firing pin or the extractor that's just going to give out on you. With this guy, we haven't seen any of those issues, and I am keeping an eye out for them today. That was around 0 to 200, now we're on to 400. All right, you guys, take a look at this. This does not look like a regular round of .223. That's because we got a split case. That's when this split off from the base of the cartridge. This is PMC X-Tac ammunition. Really, I didn't expect that from this ammunition. It's .223. It's generally been good stuff, and I've shot this stuff for years, but a split case from the ammunition, so not actually a failure on the part of the rifle. It's still going strong. Well, we've officially hit the 200 to 400 round torture test. The gun is doing hot. Again, that rail is still wobbly. I really wish I had the right Allen key for that. But overall, we had 1 malfunction, and that was actually a split casing from our PMC X-Tac. Surprisingly, nothing to do with the rifle. I'm actually pretty shocked that this thing's holding up so incredibly well. But what do we learn? Well, when it comes to budget AR-15s, you are a lot of the QC. QC takes man hours, it takes good materials, and in fact, it takes very excellent materials to make sure that there's no failures ever on something like a BCM, on a Daniel Defense, or maybe something like an LMT if you got the money. But when it comes to something like this, you are the quality control. You are going to need to shoot it, and you're going to need to find out what is going to be loose, like this handguard, and you're gonna have to fix that yourself. yourself. You just have to be okay with it if you're not coughing up thousands of dollars for a rifle. For some people, that's an absolute deal breaker. They need it to work out of the box forever. And for other people, they like to tinker around. They're gonna shoot it a lot and they don't mind replacing an extractor here or there or tightening down the rail in this case. Next, we got our 400 to 600 round test. Let's get started. Now, before we see those results, a massive thank you to our sponsors, HSL Ammunition, who does awesome affordable range ammo. If you use code SHIP9, you'll get free shipping on 1,000 round boxes of 9mm. And 945 Industries, who make these awesome quick access concealed carry off body bags. I did the math. I've been using this for over an entire year. So if you don't have a gun on your belt, you can have it on your chest. Just use code BAG10 for 10% off. I'll put a link in the description and a pinned comment, but BAG10 for 10% off your 945 Industries carry bag. Back to the video. Now that's a wrap on 400 to 600 rounds. What malfunctions did we have? What's the state of the gun? And what lessons have we learned? Well, as for the state of the gun, it's doing perfectly fine. Again, the rail, but everything else is totally flawless. It's so hot that I touched a little piece of plastic and it just melted to the muzzle device. So yeah, this thing is super hot, way too hot to hold without gloves. But again, that has nothing to do with a cheap AR-15. That would be any AR-15. As for malfunctions, well, we had none. The ejection pattern is fine. I'm able to shoot it perfectly, but we have no idea if it's gonna fail above 600 rounds because this is where the extreme stress is being put on the rifle with the heat and that higher round count. So expect to see something go wrong soon, if it's gonna go wrong at all. Now for lessons learned with these cheap AR-15s, why the heck was this Radical Firearms rifle $350? Well, it actually has to do for a good reason and not because this rifle is gonna give you problems, apparently, yet. It's gonna be for QC. If you look along the rail, you can see these dings and dents, which it looks like they tried to fix with a Sharpie, but because there's problems with the rail or it's blemished, the rifle was cheaper. Again, this is all purely cosmetic and it shouldn't cause any issues for the function of the rifle, but you are gonna see dings and dents on some of these cheap rifles you get from Radical Defense, and I'm kind of here for it. Give people an option to use the dinged and dented guns. You can see we got a pretty good ding right up there on the front. And for people who want an unblemished gun, well, they can go get an unblemished gun. But for me, these things are gonna get beat up almost instantly, if not spray painted an entirely different color. So that's why this specific rifle was so cheap. And if you find those crazy sales, expect to see some blemishes. Now let's bump it from 600 to 800 rounds. This is the penultimate test. There we go. That's 800 rounds down the drain. And now let's go over the state of the gun, any malfunctions and lessons learned. Again, no malfunctions. State of the gun, it's smoking. I think that little bit of plastic is burning off. Lessons learned, let's dive right on into it. For that, I'm going to say know the brand of rifle you're buying and the common problems that come along with it. For example, this is a Radical Defense common problem, and the reason they're so cheap is blemishes and maybe wobbly rails, which you gotta tighten down. That's not a massive problem for this brand. There are other brands that do slightly more catastrophic failures at times. For example, Bear Creek Arsenal has been known to have extractors break and firing pins break. So if you're gonna buy a Bear Creek Arsenal, know that you're gonna want to upgrade that bolt carrier group. So know your rifle and know the common problems that come along with it. Overall, I'm very surprised. Let's step it up to that final 1,000 rounds and see what goes boom. If it's the gun, if it's its parts, or maybe it'll be me. No, it definitely won't be me. Let's keep shooting. Feels really weird to be grabbing this thing by the handle like this, but that's what we gotta do for these last 200 rounds. Keep in mind, YouTube, that was a semi-automatic trigger. Please don't demonetize me, I promise. These are 29 round mags, and this is semi-automatic. Whew, that's gassy, and that is 1,000 rounds. I totally burned my wrist on the receiver of this thing. In the end, we kind of had to fire it fast, and we had one light primer strike coming close to the end while I was bump firing out of the 1,000 rounds. And I kind of just seated that bullet back in the chamber and it shot just fine. So that's the malfunctions. How about the state of the gun? This handguard really has got to get tightened down. I'm afraid it's gonna pop off. Again, it'll take 2 seconds in Loctite and that thing's good as gold. This is the damage from our experiment. 33 empty AR-15 magazines that were completely full. I think I might be off by about 5 or 6 rounds, but I threw a few extra to make up just in case. I'm absolutely shocked with how our budget AR-15 held up, and I do believe that there are budget AR-15s out there that can hold up to some serious abuse, especially when we put this thing through some very fast strings of fire through the bumping at the very end. I'm quite surprised by that. That being said, not all budget AR-15s are created equal. If you're gonna get a brand of a budget AR-15, make sure you've seen people do burn downs like this, and make sure that you know the common problems that you'll see in the first 1,000 rounds. For this, it's the wiggly handguard. I just can't get over it. It would take 10 seconds and some Loctite. So Radical, if you're listening to this, just use a little bit of Loctite and just torque that thing down and it won't come loose. But can you trust your life to a budget AR-15? Absolutely. I hope this is some important information that will help your rifle be more reliable, whether or not it's budget or whether or not this just pushes you to buy a nicer rifle. Regardless, a massive thank you for watching and subscribe for more.